Agreed. All right, so item number 2, compensation and benefit structure personnel policies. And to present with us, we have Deputy City Supervisor Jen Pibner.
Almost forgot about my unmute. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. So we do have another section of employee personnel policies. This is an ongoing series of presentations to get our policies updated. The batch that I've brought forward today is what we're calling our compensation and benefit structure. So very much kind of just literally the structure that sets us up to do a couple of different things. The 5 policies that are presented today, we've got employee classification, and this was updated per our current practice. And a little bit of ICRIMP language as well. ICRIMP is our insurance provider. Specifically, what we did was spell out a little bit more specifically our employee types. So we've got elected officials, full-time regular employees. These are people that work year-round. There's no estimated end date, and they could work anywhere from 30 hours to 40 hours, or could be exempt or non-exempt, which is down below. Then we have our part-time regular employees. Those are, again, employees that are with us without an end date set beforehand. But those employees would work 19 hours or less. And that 19 is very specific because of PERSI regulations. Once you work a certain amount of weeks, over 19 hours, PERSI will charge both the employer and the employee for that retirement benefit, which can work out well if it's more of a long-term situation. But if an employee knows they'll only be there a certain amount of time, managing those hours per week becomes important. Then that's part-time employees, again, 19 hours or less. And then we've got full or part-time, they could be either, temporary employees. And these are typically our folks that work seasonally with us, or our interns who may not be with us for a season, but are maybe with us for a year or 2 years, a semester or 2 semesters, whatever it may be. And then full or part-time temporary employees. Then the last 2 categories we have in that policy are the types of performance systems that our employees may fall under. That's the actively managed performance system that we refer to as AMPS. That's all employees except law enforcement officers, sworn officers. And then we have step and grade, which applies only to our sworn law enforcement officers. So a lot more detail in that policy, just really updated to how we currently manage things and how we currently categorize our employees. Salary administration, very minor updates, spelled out a little bit more where we hire folks, how that works, at what level in the pay schedule, I should say. It just really reflects current practice, fleshed out a little bit more, but nothing significantly different there. Compensation is a new policy, and this was recommended per ICRIMP, again, our insurance providers. It basically says we're going to comply with state and federal pay acts, that we have employee compensation established, and how that falls within the city council's decisions when it comes to budgets and such. And then a right to change compensation and benefits. This is another item. We can change compensation as deemed appropriate by the city council. If an employee has a concern about their compensation, they have absolutely the right to come talk to the Human Resources Department or their supervisor, and we make note of that. And this, I think, ties in really well with our salary administration piece when we talk about salary surveys too. So that information all goes together. Benefits, again, is minor updates to what we're doing currently and the language itself. So we flesh that out a little bit more, keeping a closer tie with what types of employee categories we have to make it clear. A couple of the items there, we talk about the insurance coverage that becomes effective the first day of the next month after you start. So if you start April 2nd, your benefits become effective as of May 1. So just timeline there. And then we've got qualifying events, we've got open enrollment. Those things are touched on a bit as well. I'm used to have that retirement piece in there. Again, that's where we mentioned 20 hours or more per week. So circling back to that 19 hours or less. And then we note that, of course, city makes contributions on behalf of the employee, and the employee is responsible for those contributions as well, their portion of the contributions. The most significant change, and probably the shortest policy in here, is our work period. We currently have a Sunday to Monday work period. We did a payroll audit, payroll policies and procedures audit. I shouldn't say audit, I should say management analysis. And basically they reviewed all of our processes. This was Brittany Gunderson, who was with us just a bit ago. talked with our auditors about a couple of things, and we're hoping that this change in policy will help us meet a few things. In particular, it was being able to have timesheets be correct. We do have people that work the weekends, and if adjustments need to be made after that timesheet's predetermined, this is the schedule, this is what I anticipate to be working. If there's a change there, then that requires a supplemental timesheet, so it's another round of paperwork. This should give us a little bit of buffer time to be able to manage those types of things, so less changes after the fact. It still fits in with our 7-day work period for our non-law enforcement. Of course, our law enforcement and fire personnel have a 14-day work period. So these are just came from the recommendations of that report. The timing of this will be important. And also I wanted to mention that we'll keep presenting these sections of personnel policies, keeping our current policies in place so as to not confuse the matter, especially when we have some policies that are either combined into two or broken out into two. There's some adjustments that are happening that way. This also ties in nicely with our implementation of the BS&A software, not having to make a giant change to our current financial software, because that would be a bit of it would be much more difficult to implement than to launch with BS&A. BS&A is kind of set up and able to do that. That kind of change in Springbrook would be tricky and cumbersome. So timing works out well. We still have, I think, 6 or 7 more sections that we'll be bringing forward. So that'll take us to after the holidays into February, March. And so hopefully all of that will time out well. So just a side note on that one. Did have a couple of questions that I wanted to follow up on. In this section of policies, we do have an at-will employment status, which is a function of the state. And I wanted to note that while employees are considered at will, the city also has a fairly robust progressive discipline process that we have, and you'll see that in a policy coming forward. And really, it's that idea that we want to help an employee find success. You don't see termination of employees unless like immediate termination, unless it's something illegal, highly unethical, highly immoral, those types of things. We have processes to try to help an employee find success and give them time to work through that. So the other question was asked, our breakdown of employees in those different employee classifications. So we have one position that is 30 hours per week. We have 2 positions that are at that 19 hours per week or less. And these are permanent employees. They come to work every single day. We don't anticipate that position going away anytime soon. And then all others, that we have 160 employees that are at full-time permanent status. And then those 30-hour, that one position, we actually used to have 2, we're down to 1 now. The 30-hour employee position does have access to benefits. We prorate that a bit based on the hours worked. And then the 2 positions at 19 hours per week or less are not benefit eligible. I think those were, and then the other question I had, let's see here. Any employee that could be terminated that has a concern about retaliation or discrimination, you'll also see language in future policies about how we have a 0 tolerance for retaliation or discrimination. And that through that process, that progressive discipline process, we would ideally work that out and figure out what might be going on there and have another process put in place for whatever other issue may be coming up with that. So those 2 processes, we really appreciate those 2. So, and then I think, Anne, you had another question?
It was just what the approximate cost would be for making health benefits eligible for the seasonal employees.
So for our seasonal employees, we have about 130 seasonal employees on average. And this is everything from lifeguards at the pool to lawn or landscape maintenance at the park shop, streets, really can be all over the city. So with those employees, it's typically a 5-month seasonal opportunity. We have a couple of 8-month opportunities. It really goes with the weather cycle and what Percy will allow you to do. So 130 employees, it costs for one employee, just the individual employee, it costs $672 and I think 20 odd cents per month to insure that employee. So not knowing how many employees would be interested in that benefit, and I'm thinking primarily of demographics and age. A lot of our lifeguards and whatnot are still on other plans with parents or guardians. So that one does throw a variable in there. And then looking at, especially with that 5-month stint, if you start again like April 2nd, your benefits don't start till May 1. The administration and I want to touch base with our broker Murray Group on what that would look like for our experience ratings and administration and things like that. So, I mean, 5 months worth of benefits costs about $3,300. That's assuming you get them started right when they start, if they start on the 1st or something like that. And then that times however many employees might be interested. And again, not taking into consideration the administration of that as well. So I don't have a great answer for that. I don't have a very realistic answer for that. And I don't have an idea of the technicalities that go behind it. Mm-hmm. But I'd be happy to work on that.
Yeah, it's just something I'm curious about, especially, I mean, like this summer is such a good example, right? I mean, the pool had really different circumstances, but I mean, we live in a state and a country where it's tied to our employment. And so for having that being offered to the vast majority of our employees is something that I wanted to ask about. And then, so that the premium cost of like $675 roughly, that for full-time employees, does that come out of their paycheck then?
So typically? For our employee benefit costs, so the employee is covered at 100%. We pay for all of our full-time we pay for all of our employees, that $675 prorated a bit for any 30-hour employees positions that we may have. And then the city also pays 50% of dependents. And the dependent cost is a bit different if it's a spouse versus a kiddo. That cost is a little bit different. So there's a balance there and that would be the additional variable is how many of our seasonal personnel might have dependents. And that cost would, of course, on the city side go up, but would also go up for the employee as well. So, so there's a balance there of what the city will cover for the employee and then half for the family.
Thank you for answering all of those questions. I really appreciate it.
You bet.
So I have a question. Under the section that talks about benefits, so if somebody works 30 hours a week, they pay proportionally, but the answer is no matter whether you're full-time or you're 30 hours, you're still, the employee has to pay the full amount for any dependent, right?
No, the employee will only pay half the amount of the dependents. It would be proportionate to that 30 hours. So the city would still pick up the majority of that. Their cost may be just a titch higher.
Okay. And then there's a section here that talks about compensation. Mm-hmm. And there's a section that says, this is just a question of me understanding the process, and that is that sometimes there's a thing in terms of raises based on someone's annual evaluation. Mm-hmm. And so my question is, do we add money in to our budget? And I didn't notice it when I was looking at the budget. Do we add money in there that says, in case someone gets 5s, which may be the top, that we have money left over for them to do that? I mean, it doesn't have to come back to us, does it?
So it does come to the council in the budget process, and we typically look at a cost of living and then a performance increase percentage amount. And finance will break that out amongst all of the different departments, divisions, and funds. So each area's full-time wages would be increased by, if it's 1% COLA and a 4% cost of living, that would increase by 5%. What we do then through the AMPS process is typically grade it on a curve. So the ones with the 5s get the higher performance increases, and then the ones with the lower scores get less. So you do appropriate that amount in the budget process, and then we take that amount and make sure that our performance increases fit within it.
Great, thank you.
Were there any other questions or comments for Jen?
Nope.
All right. Are we thinking consent agenda for this or full agenda?
I may have a couple of small changes as we're getting feedback from other folks, but I don't anticipate it to be anything significant. Whichever the committee is comfortable with, from my perspective.
I think you can do consent. I think we've got a lot of other issues going on.
I think consent is fine.
Sounds good. And that brings us to our last item, which is a report from Jen as well about the winter event date.
So as we are beginning planning, and in some instances have delayed starting planning on events, of course, COVID is the main concern we're talking about here. We're looking at our winter carnival. We're looking at, that includes the parade, that includes a tree lighting, many other little events that kind of take a place within that. We've got breakfast with Santa as well. So we've got a few events that come up in the winter time for the holidays that typically are based on having large groups of people come together to celebrate and be festive. We are for this season recommending that the Winter Carnival be canceled as it typically is seen. We've got staff that are already looking at, okay, what are other alternatives? For instance, we know we still want to have a tree downtown. We may not have a large group of people down to light it, but maybe we'll do a Facebook Live, something to light the tree, something where we can still have some of those traditions in place, but it's going to be difficult to celebrate them in the same way we always have, as we've seen throughout the year. So I wanted to let folks know that we also have community event permits or applications for permits being submitted for some large groups. And as we discussed, I think it was a month ago, and the council gave direction to evaluate those. And if there's anything significant that doesn't seem in keeping with the public health emergency order, that will identify those and work with folks to let them know that it's not a good fit for this year. So it's just kind of a heads up. We're at that point again where it's time to plan, or other folks are starting to plan, and we want to make sure that we're upfront with them on what the city's doing with our events, and then what they can expect with their events applications as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Is there anything else? Any questions or anything for the good of the order?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay. Any motions to adjourn?
Yes.
Go.
Sounds
First
good.
and
All right.
second,
Thanks,
here we go.
everyone. Have a nice afternoon.